Hello. Thank you so much for having me here. The very first thing I'm going to do is ring the bell, okay? I'm going to ask you just to listen carefully for just a moment. So here we go. So the very next thing I'm going to ask you to do is take a nice deep breath in and a big sigh. Wow. That was amazing. That was probably the best Minnesota sigh I've heard. You know, when I first came here, I came here in 1988. When I first started running classes and I would ask people to do that, I would go, nice big sigh, and I would hear. So I want to thank you for that. And that's one of the first things about claiming our power. So our conversation here today is going to be about power versus force. The book David Hawkins, yes. I read that book about 25 years ago. So I'm not going to be coming from that book, but I want to talk about the subject, power versus force. The very first thing I want to bring up is, to me, it's not power versus force. It's about understanding the difference between power and force. Power and force are like light and darkness. Force has no power. Okay? We want to recognize that. Power versus force. Power is about the idea of what comes through us. We are a conduit to power. You know, like when you say that perfect thing, you know, when you have that brilliant idea, when that thing happens that you don't expect, that changes your whole life. This is power. Power is about our ability to be present. We don't access power without our own presence. You know, for me, we are all star people. We're star men, star women, okay? We are made of star stuff and solar creatures. So what I'm suggesting is that this solar energy is not just the light that we can see. It's an energy that is present for us in any given moment, but only if we're really present, you know? So I want to give you a little bit about my history and what brought me to this subject. I don't usually use quite the same language, but it's like the idea of water. You know, I'm interested in drinking good, clean water. Okay, I don't care what you call it. I'm interested in accessing my ability to have, power flow through me. Okay? Now, when I first came in contact with this as an idea, I'm talking about power, it was early in my life. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in an extremely violent Irish community. We were the first black family to move into the community. I actually come from a mixed race family. Okay? I also had a parent who was also very, very aggressive. So my point is that I was being indoctrinated with force on a regular basis. Not only that, but I think with a lot of us, we don't recognize how much force is interwoven in our shared history. In the history of this country, you know, the overwhelming force that was used in order to claim this country, manifest destiny, you know. But at the same time, we don't recognize how much we have used force. We tend to focus on the force that was used on us. You know, we want to recognize, if you live in the midst of a toxic waste dump, you can't be surprised that you have high levels of toxicity. I grew up with the idea of force being a good thing. I was into John Wayne movies. I loved Charles Bronson. All these heroes of my childhood were extremely forceful individuals. I thought force was the way you got things done. I grew up in a community, Irish people, African American people, everybody was so forceful. So I want to bring up a few elements about our relationship to force. What is force? When you use force, you automatically are in the presence of another. Okay? Originally, when we talk about terms like Satan, we were talking about the other. The other is always, in our mind, something bad. Power accesses kindness, right? When you have kindness, you feel unity. The root of the word kindness is kin. We are one family. When force is used, there's automatically the application of resistance. We rebel when force is used against us. Even when we are faced with overwhelming force and we are terrified by the person using the force, on some level we will find a rebellion. So force is a strategy to try to control our environment. So we want to recognize, even if you grew up in this situation, and I would suggest that almost every single one of us grew up in a situation that was extremely forceful. It's not always the same application of force. Sometimes force is a bully. But sometimes force is someone who's trying to control and manipulate you. It can be very subtle. We want to recognize this application of force and how we use it. We all are focused on how force was used on us. But in our secret sense of shame, we have also used force on others. Even if you had a parent who was extremely forceful and you didn't enjoy it, you're going to find when you're doing your parenting that sometimes you're accessing that. Okay? So what I'm suggesting is our ability to find power is about our ability to get really, really present. Our ability to find power is about self-empowerment. It's about the idea of controlling your own attention. Your attention is like a fire hose, a high-powered fire hose. It's a great tool, but if nobody's in control of it, it can do a lot of damage. We are going to naturally bring our attention towards the things that we are feeling most intensely. We think we want to be happy, but what we're really doing is focusing on what we don't like. I just want to tell you how excited I am to be here with you guys in this strange and wonderful time in human history. Wow. Have you guys noticed that? Am I the only one? Wow, it's amazing. You know, one of the things that I talk about is this incredible nobility of the human spirit. And when I talk about that stuff, man, it's like punk music in 1976. People are just amazed that I'm thinking that we have this nobility. It's in the source of our power. What I'm suggesting is that in my process, I was in this situation, I was afraid all the time, intensely afraid. I was taught a lot about hell. I grew up in extremely hard punishments. People were saying things to me everywhere I was going. Hell seemed like a reasonable thing to me. I felt like I was going to hell. I felt like I was living in hell, and I was going to go to hell, and I probably deserved it. This is what force does. It gets into our head, and it begins to mess with us. Now, there was a TV show in 1972 called Kung Fu. Does anybody remember that show? Yeah. I love that show, Kung Fu. I was all up into it. I was 8 years old when that show came out. So I was watching it, and I was really sort of fascinated by this guy's ability to defend himself. And then all of a sudden, I realized that it wasn't force that he was using, it was power. Okay? He was using elements of pop Taoism. I didn't know what that was at the time. I was 8 years old. But I became interested in it. By the time I was 11-year-old, between 8 and 11 years old, I was going and, to be honest, I was stealing books on meditation practice. I remember I got caught one time, and the guy looked at me and he's like, here, take it, you can go home. Yeah? Don't worry, I'm not doing that anymore. That was an early part of my process. But I began to try to practice meditation by the time I was 11 years old. I had this idea that if I could be equally balanced as the person I was dealing with was aggressive, that I would be able to manage my fear. And so I kept working at it. By the time I was in my early 20s and I finally got out of that neighborhood, I was still having these intense fear experiences. I was experiencing what some people call PTSD. I would be sitting by myself and become terrified. And it was worse because when I begin chased by 20 people, the amount of times I was attacked goes probably 100 times. I mean, really seriously attacked. Okay? When no one was chasing me and I was still afraid, it was worse than being chased. But I had a thing that happened to me that was so unbelievably wonderful. I kept studying things. I was studying things from all over the world. I'm not a particular religious faith. I'm interested in anything that's going to help me find my way. In my process, if someone told me and they could convince me that it was going to help manage my fear and also the anger that I began to have, if they told me going out at 3 o'clock in the morning, naked and waving a frozen chicken over my head was going to help me, I was going to be out there. If we lived next door, you'd have been like, oh, Drake's outside again. I'd have been out there. Okay? All right? I was intent on releasing this. But, it was very, very interesting for me because this is what happens to us within practice. On some level, we want to let go of the use of force. But secretly, we kind of want to hold on to the use of force. It's like a trump card. I was a big guy, 6'5", I was 250. If I became angry, I got results, right? What I would suggest is that your thing, your pet thing that you use to force people is something you're going to have a hard time letting go of. It's kind of like finding a wooden plank in your driveway, like a plywood plank, and going out there, you're going to throw it out, and you go out there and you step on it, and you dig your fingers underneath it. Well, you're going to have to dig really hard because you're standing on it, so you really dig your fingers underneath it. It's painful to do, and you're straining with all your might to pick it up. Your veins are popping out of your head, you're sweating. The idea is, as long as you're standing on that plank, you're not going to be able to pick it up. Force does not work. Power works. So we want to understand this relationship to the two. I would suggest to you, and one of the reasons why I'm becoming a lot more active right now is this time in our country reminds me of the neighborhood I grew up in. Okay? As things changed, as it gradually changed, it got more and more intense. When I was a little kid, people would spit on me. Adults would call me names. People would throw dog poop at me. When I got older, when I was 15, 16, as a big kid, guys would roll up, 3 guys, 4 guys with baseball bats, and it's on. You don't know if they're going to try to kill you. One of my friends was beaten to death. You don't know if they're going to try to kill you. And so, you begin to breathe it in. You incorporate it. One of the things I would like to suggest to you is the average person is going to do what the average person is doing. If you grow up in a real meat-eating family, okay, you're going to eat meat. You may even make a great roast and end up a vegan one day. You are going to take on the energy that you come from. So what I'm saying is that if you're coming from a toxic environment, if you're coming from a place that's filled with gang activity and they target you, are you really going to be that aberration who doesn't join the gang? If you're growing up with, incredible misogyny, for a while until you learn better, you're going to have those qualities. Racist, all that stuff. But we want to recognize that all that is force related. We want to step into our ability to have power. Powers are about the ability to be in contact with the subtle in the midst of intensity. There's lots of different examples of force. I remember when I first came here, I had a house, and I had to chop down a tree. Well, where I came from Chicago, we never chopped trees down. I had never done it before. I didn't know how to do it. I went and got an axe, and I went to this tree, and I'm big and strong, and I started laying into this, all my power. Wham! Wham! Shockwaves were going through my body. Suddenly I realized the tree was actually stronger than me. And then I began to let the axe do it, and then it was actually quite easy to bring it down. Power is easy. It flows through you. It's beautiful. Force is forceful. So what I'm suggesting is that what got me going in practice, and the key thing that changed my life was the what is called in Tibetan Buddhism, bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Is anyone familiar with that term? Yeah, okay. Bodhicitta. Now, I didn't know it. I never heard of it before. Before I even came in contact with it, I knew what it was. One of the most powerful things is when you hear something that you've never heard before, but that you know it's true. You never heard it before, but you already know it's true. When I heard about bodhicitta, I knew it was true because it applied to my own life. I thought that if I could learn how to not be afraid, that it would be helpful to other people. One time I saw a young man he was about 11, 12 years old, and he was with his uncle, the only 2 people there. His uncle was working on a car. And that car, the jack began to fail. And that car began to sink onto his uncle's chest. This is an 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid, skinny. He went to the bumper and he lifted that car, and his uncle was able to scramble out. There was no way he had the strength to do it. He wasn't trying to access his force. Okay, when you are accessing force, you don't have deep roots. When you are accessing power, the whole thing is coming through you. Okay, so to me, the application of power is opening yourself up to the spirit of genius. When I do my groups, I usually do them in a circle. And I do them in a circle because I'm not into the cult of personality. It's not about any particular person. I learned a long time ago that my heroes always had something in them that I felt disappointed in. I am not looking to idealize anybody. Even my heroes, I don't idealize them. So to me, the spirit of genius is the idea of opening to power. When one person in the group says something to another person in the group, when it always doesn't come from me, there's a power in that. When you find yourself saying something that's perfect, you grow. When you are listening to someone who says something perfect, who's not the instructor, you grow. So this is what I'm talking about, realizing that if we can open ourselves up and open our heart, we can find power. I just want to tell you, I felt incredibly powerless. I felt incredibly powerless. You couldn't argue it to me. I could tell you, and I could break it down. I'm walking down the street, the police come and pull me over. Okay? I could tell you, I could break it down. You couldn't argue it. I can tell you that force was what I needed, but that's not what I needed. Just because you can argue it, just because you know it's true, doesn't make it right. I'm suggesting stepping into being open to power, opening your heart, knowing what your deepest values are, not being reactionary. Okay? One of the things that's disturbed me in the last few years is how even some of the people that I really respect began to use negative energy, becoming very, very aggressive, saying really cruel things. Even if I thought that they were right in what their essential, thing they were arguing for is. We cannot give up our values. You have to know what your values are. When you know what your values are and you adhere to them, you are connecting with power. My values are kindness. Kindness is all important. Okay? When you see two people fighting, they're not on opposite sides. They are in the same view of reality. My values are compassion, understanding how people go wrong, having compassion for myself when I went wrong. Okay? My value is joy. I'm coming from joy. I'm suggesting to you that it's imperative, if you don't like what's been going on, it's imperative for you to start recognizing that you are incredibly powerful. And you're not just powerful when other people know about it. You're powerful in the last 5 minutes of your life, even when everybody else has left you. You matter. You are at the center of an incredible lyric poem. You are Gilgamesh. You are Odysseus. But you have to claim your power. Okay? I claim my power. I walk with power. And I claim it because it was needed. I'm not claiming it for a self-aggrandizement. First of all, I'm claiming it because it made my life incredibly much better. But I found that I had a large capacity to be forceful. Force doesn't recognize the implications of what it does. When force acts, it creates an oppositional energy. So what I'm suggesting is if you realize the need for your power, you will find it. Don't kid yourself. In the back of your mind, you still, or at least a lot of us do, still think force is the way to do things when the chips are down. I'm suggesting that it's not. If you recognize how much you are needed, you will find that you're incredibly powerful. And you don't have to go out there on the rooftops. It's about what you do, how you go in your average day. It's about having the ability to forgive yourself when you lose your temper, but getting back to your actual direction. So I just really want to bring this up and really bring the importance of really accessing this intention. Intention is not a wish, it's not a hope. I'm not hoping my daughter eats today, I'm intending that she does. And I'm intending a shift in the world, and I realize that the shift in the world comes with me. If you're talking to someone and you're involved in an intense argument, you're at a party, and suddenly the couch you're sitting on bursts into fire, I would suggest that maybe what you're talking about is no longer the number one priority. Even if you're talking about what's going on in the government. I would suggest that putting that fire out isn't the number one priority. The fire is your relationship to force. It's about your relationship to your emotions. It's about collapsing and forgetting. You can't access power without presence. You will access force. So you got to put the fire out. And you have to realize that that's the number one priority. You have to begin to watch your patterns. When do you want to become forceful? You know, we never use force against the good guy. We always use it against the bad guy. But everybody thinks someone's the bad guy, and they always want to use force on them. So where is this coming from? Where can I find these patterns? What tends to make me upset? Do you notice how people who are really, really angry want to talk to you about what they're angry about all the time? I have a friend who's always trying to convince me that his political affiliation is correct, and his way of doing that is to tell me how stupid I am. I don't know about you, but that's not real effective for me. Right? It's an attempt to use force. So what are your tendencies? You know, for a while there, what was happening for me is I couldn't wait to get up in the morning. What's going on now? You know, I wanted to see it. It's titillating. Okay? It's about neutralizing that. It's about realizing that when you are activating a sense of using force, it's like riding, you know, what was it? John F. Kennedy said this. You know, if you ride a tiger, don't be surprised if you end up inside one. Force is not controllable. It's like a wildfire. It burns out of control. Yeah, you may have somebody that you feel is a legitimate object of your force. Maybe someone cuts you off. But when you apply force in answer to force, that's when you have a road rage incident. Okay? When you apply force, that's when things happen at home. You're angry about things going on in the job. I'm going to tell you that people that get force applied to them the most are by family members. Right? Everybody knows that. We treat the people that we love the most, the worst, in our application of force. And the stranger. Those are the two. So, you know, I want to check in with you guys, but I want to do a practice. But I'm interested. I'd like to hear something from you guys as well. But I want to do a practice first. And again, to me, one of the things is really realizing that you need to get going with this. Hey, you know one of my favorite things? Yes, please.
I just have a comment on power.
Yes.
Versus force.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one example that I think that I could share that.
Sure, go right ahead.
That might, you can tell me if that's an example of.
Please.
I've had a lot of challenges in my life and continue. And I think that instead of saying I'm stressed, I've been trying, I always say challenge because then, because I'm a strong person, so I think that I can get through it. But when I moved out of the cities and moved my family up north on my 7 acres, that was probably one of the hardest things I ever did because I was trying to figure out how to get out of there and get back to the cities and move my family back here because everything was so hard after my husband had a stroke and everything was put on me. So like with the well problems and the sewer problems and moving into the house that was a garage and having a little one to raise. So I cried every week, and the closer I got home, the harder I would cry because I just didn't know how I was going to do it anymore. I mean, the problems just kept arising more and more and more, and I couldn't solve the problems fast enough. So I finally looked at my daughter. I have an amazing family, by the way, but I like your comment about that too. Family is the hardest. And so I finally looked at my daughter one day and I said, okay, here's the situation because of the finances and everything involved. I said, here's the deal. I said, I think it doesn't matter where you live. It's what you create. And I'm willing to learn because it's like I couldn't find help, you know, for all my problems, my solutions. And I knew that, you know, I was going to have to create. And I knew to create, I was going to have to learn. And so I was going to have to find my way. And ever since I said that I'm willing to learn and create, things have gotten so much better. And have gotten so much done that way.
That's
So I don't
wonderful.
know if that's power.
That's definitely power. And I just want to bring up a couple things about what you just said. One is her framing. One of the things that we think or we talk about is framing. How are you framing the subject? I would suggest that there's not a human being in this world who's not ugly if you frame them the wrong way. Okay? How are you framing the subject? Even, it's like the, some of the greatest avenues of power and come through some of the most challenging circumstances of your life. If you really think about the people that you are most influenced by, inspired by, you're going to also think about them in relationship to their challenge. That's part of how they inspired you, is how you faced that challenge. What you just expressed was incredibly inspirational. We got to get inspired. It's about getting inspired today. It's not about waiting. Okay, I got to put that on my schedule. I got to get inspired. No, you got to get inspired right now. Putting it on your schedule is like the idea of putting it on your schedule, I'm going to breathe. Well, no, you need to breathe now. So how you frame it, the language you use, it's so important for us to recognize that the most important audience member at all times is our own deep consciousness. How we describe it to ourselves or to the other person, how we always do that? We make it a little bit more intense so they really get how we're feeling. Well, your deeper self is not at the intellectual level of your surface. Your deeper self is a childlike consciousness. And what you say with conviction and intensity, it takes as reality and begins to manifest. It's like the time I was riding my bike, when I first started riding a bike, and I was so freaked out about the mailbox. There's all that expansive space, and I go towards the mailbox. I would suggest that's what's happened in our country and our world. We got so inflamed with anxiety, and then again, when fear is one of the greatest highways to force, right? And when you do use force, you always have to have a rationalization. You have to have a reason why the person deserved it. Okay? We are building our own prison. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. We are building our own prison, and we have the key to it. And we have to recognize that we have to come from those deeper values no matter what. And when we do get ourselves in contact with our subtlety, what finds out is that we have some sort of passion, usually related to what helped us to heal. And then we don't have to push ourselves, we're drawn forward. It's a very, very powerful thing, but we have to start appreciating where we are. As a child, I fell into a swimming pool. There was no one around. I sank right to the bottom of the pool. And I pushed off as hard as I could, and I yanked myself out of that pool, and I was laying there with all my clothes on, and I suddenly had this realization that if I hadn't gotten to the bottom of that pool, I was actually not going to get out. The bottom is not such a bad place to be if you recognize the power of it. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm filled with joy, because I'm filled with joy because I need it. I'm filled with joy because if I wasn't filled with joy, I'd get really depressed. All the stuff I see going on, things I hear saying, sometimes things I see people saying that I know, that's disappointing. Sometimes it's disappointing to be me when I lose my temper. Right? As soon as possible, we got to get right back on point and find that subtlety. Subtlety is the key. When you are able to pay attention to the subtle in the midst of the intense, that is the key. So I'd like us to do a practice real quick. Now, one of the things I would suggest is that you're already doing practice all day long. What you say to yourself with intensity becomes your reality. Right? If you get caught up in a sense of bias against another group and you're intensely focusing on them on a regular basis, you're going to come out of your house and someone from that group is going to be breaking into your car right in front of you. It's going to be like, yes, see? What I'm saying is it's attractive. The need for force is attractive. Okay? And so what I am suggesting is one of the ways to find power is what in Buddhism is called the magic city. The magic city. It tells a story about a great teacher who was taking a group through a long and arduous process. And at a certain point, they start really breaking down. They start experiencing what I call existential fatigue. When you get disappointed so many times, The disappointments start as a child, and then you start, having this figure or that figure. One of the issues of right now is we know too much about each other. So the Magic City is that place that you can go to that you can recharge your batteries. I'm suggesting you go to the Magic City once a day. The Magic City is an experience that is so immersive that you cannot hold on to what you're thinking about. If you jump into an ice-cold lake, I don't care how much you're into your politics, there's going to be a moment where you're going to forget about it. Right? That's the Magic City. You want to make sure that the people that you're traveling with are going to the Magic City. If you're on an airplane and you're going to Los Angeles and everybody else is going to New York on the plane, you're on the wrong plane. So we got to have the right people around us. We have to be in contact with community, and we have to do practice. And one of the best ways are micro practices. For me, micro practices are practices that you can do from anywhere from 0 to 2 minutes. And so I season my day. A great meal, you have to season it. I season my day with micro practices. How many times in a day do you say something really negative to yourself? You express it with intensity. Part of us wants to become something new, and part of us doesn't want to become something new because that means death. So the Magic City is immersive practice. There are practices that the micro practices can be done in just a couple minutes, and I'm going to ask you to do a micro practice with me right now. So you can do this with your eyes open or closed. I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably. So one of the things that we want to recognize is that if we want to access power, we have to start with the body. If you're tight in your heart, if you're tight through your shoulders, if you're tight through your jaws, that creates a blockage to power. So eyes closed, I'm going to ask you don't have to close your eyes, you can also just drop your vision slightly. But I'm going to ask you just to tap into intention, intend to relax. Intend to relax and feel it transfer through the hands. Feel the hands softening all the way through the shoulders, through the neck and jaws. I'm just going to ask you to access the breath. Let the breath come in and out. Just feel a sweeping breath going in and out. And pay attention to smell. Breathing slowly and easily. See if you can smell anything. Can you smell more than one thing? Transferring your awareness into taste. Breathing. Don't forget to breathe slowly and easily, full breaths. Notice if you can taste anything. Is there the taste, the echo of coffee, perhaps? Aware of touch. Be aware of touch. Feel your tongue. Notice if there's a burst of saliva. Aware of your lips and your face. Feel your whole body surrounded by air. Noticing touch all the way through the clothes, through your hands and feet. Tapping into the power of intention. Breathing slowly and easily. Be aware of temperature. Are you comfortable? Noticing space. Even with your eyes closed, you can tell how close people are. You can have a sense of how high the ceiling is. Breathing, aware of the rhythm of your breath and the rhythm of your heart. Aware of sight. Can you see anything? Breathing slowly and easily. Now I'm asking you to listen intently. Listen carefully. Listen for every sound. Breathing slowly and easily, listening carefully. Listening carefully. Carefully. Breathing slowly and easily. Take a nice, easy breath in and a nice sigh. Ah. Eyes opening. Did you guys hear that horn there at the end? I had to pay that guy extra to do that. Okay? Right? When we're present, we use what's available, whatever it is. So just notice yourself. One of the most powerful times in practice is the moment after practice. Be aware of that echo. So you guys remember, I did a thing on existential fatigue not too long ago, which is really, existential fatigue is about being in the presence of power often. It just wears you out. Okay? There's a famous picture from the Depression of a young woman, and she's with her children. And when I first became aware of this picture, I thought this was an old woman. She was actually a young woman, but you could see the strain on her face. If you Google it, famous picture from the Depression, the page will be almost all that picture. That was existential fatigue. So what I'm saying is existential fatigue is like having an engine on all the time. We get worn out. We just keep muscling through, when you're muscling through constantly. So the Magic City immersive practice helps us to recharge. So I just want to ask anyone at all, if you could, how'd that go? Was that easy or challenging? Can someone grab a mic for me and just tell me what their expression was? I am willing to take volunteers.
Thank you, Drake. I felt really at peace with you leading us through all the senses and what we were experiencing. And then suddenly I was just filled with a sense of love that made me just want to give into grief.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
That was my experience.
That is wonderful. Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I, too, like the way you led the meditation. One of the things that I like to do just to get centered and be really present is to close my eyes and then see how far my hearing goes out. See how far the furthest distance I can hear something. That puts me right in the present moment.
That's beautiful. Just a couple of things before you go on. I want to say one thing about each person. One thing is that we want to recognize, if you take a balloon filled with some sort of gas that will make it float in the air, and you take that balloon and shove it underneath the surface of a pool all the way to the bottom, if you relax, the balloon is going to pop up. And if you relax, not only would it pop up, it'll come to the surface, you'll be able to see it visually, and then it'll go off into the sky. So what I'm saying is meditation, practice, learning to be open to power, it takes courage. We got to be warriors, because part of what ends up happening is part of what floats off is the stuff that we don't want to see. It's icky stuff. It's like when you do a fast and you purge and nasty stuff comes out. Learning to become more relaxed is no day at the beach. Right? Part of us doesn't want to relax because we got to deal with our stuff. And again, your body has been in the present 100% of the time of your life. Not even 1 second has it been in the present or in the future or the past. So we typically use our body as an avenue to get ourselves worked up. Am I dying? What's that? What's this? We have the opportunity to use the body as a means of calming down. Let me ask 2 more people what their experience was in that situation.
You asked us to do taste, so then I went into present moment taste, but then I was transported to yesterday at this beautiful hors d'oeuvre that was so yummy, and so I was just there, and then I'm like, oh, and then so I was totally out of present, and I had to figure out, okay, be back here.
Well,
hors d'oeuvre's done. Dang.
Part of what happened in that moment when you lost that presence is you also found a judgment for losing the presence. Okay? What I would suggest is that sometimes, that's one of the reasons why it's great to have a pad next to you. If you come up with the cure to cancer while you're meditating, it might be a good idea to write it down. So it's not, we don't want to judge it. Sometimes, again, power it takes you where it feels you need to go. Power doesn't necessarily take you where you feel you need to go. So what I'm saying is that when you're really in presence, very oftentimes you might have something that comes up that's exactly what you need. We don't want to get so focused on being present that we block inspiration that comes up. Maybe you got a great recipe coming through. You know what I mean? And by the way, smell, you know, it's so interesting. We have all these ways of describing the experience of God. You know, we see God all over the world. People have visions, you know, well, most of the places around the world. Some people don't. But anyway, we have visions of that. We talk about hearing the harps, you know, all this stuff. But we don't usually mention smell. We don't usually mention smelling God, right? What I would suggest is that smell is one of the most evocative of your senses. You know, smell is that thing that will bring you back to your grandmother's house, and all of a sudden you're just really there, right? So this is one of the power of our senses. One more person, and I'm going to do one more thing before.
Sorry. You know what occurred to me is the availability of instant access without having to work too hard or meditate for 3 hours. You know, I really love the concept of just instant access, which is very refreshing. And I think for a lot of us, we don't feel like that's something that is available to us.
Well, you know, one of the things, we don't call it power, but one of the things that's an expression of power is intuition. It whispers in your ear. You know, when you're really present, you don't have to tell yourself what to do. Your shoulders are like this. And all of a sudden you get really present, all of a sudden your shoulders just, you relax. When you know something, you don't have to tell yourself to do it. If you're sitting on a hot burner, a red hot burner, you don't have to go through a thought process like to get off. When you're really, really present, you spontaneously act. You spontaneously have connection to wisdom. Being present doesn't mean having what you want. Being present is loving what is. You know, kindness is so deeply important. Kindness. And recognizing that when you are using force, you're talking about a fracturing. Force is never applied to oneself in kindness. Force is always applied to another. So what I would suggest is that a lot of time what we're trying to do when we're trying to create change is we're trying to force ourselves to change. And we already said that when force is applied, there's automatically a rebellion. So, all right, does anyone else have one more thing? And then you know.
Well, I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, that's okay.
Well, when you talked about power versus force, and when we were meditating, I stopped resisting. I just let myself go, and it just came so easy. You know, I eased up, and then it felt good. And most time I live this thing, and when I'm brushing my hair, and I brush my hair sometimes so hard, powerfully, like, and then it tangles, and I just, one moment I get to be present, I say to myself, just be gentle, it will be easier. And then when I do gentle, it just tangles, goes
away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
that's my thing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You know, we are being led. We live in a benevolent universe. So I want to ask you guys a question. We're going to sum things up. But I want to ask you guys a question. And I'm not actually looking for an answer. I'm just asking you to sit with yourself. So if I asked you to describe your face, what would you say? If I asked you to describe your face, how would you describe your face? So I'm bringing this question up because I want to bring up, there's an author by the name of D.E. Harding, I think it's his name. He had a book called On Having No Head. And he described this idea of your face. What I'm suggesting, what he suggested, is that you don't actually know what your face looks like. You've never actually seen your face. You've seen reflections. You've seen images. But your actual experience of your face is the experience you're having right now. What is your face? Not from the outside, but from the inside. What is your face? Your face is a mirror. Your face is a mirror. So I just want to bring up that if you want to access power, you don't go to the mirror and clean the food off the lips of the image. You recognize that it's about your face. What you're seeing in the world is a call to action, but it's a call to action to you in your life. It's a call to action to do what you feel that needs to be done. This is our time, and we can live it, and we can step into our power. So I just really want to thank you for your investment in power today. I'm asking you to change the world today, and I'm asking you to intend it right now. If you get a Christmas present, you order it from Amazon, once you order it, you're not stressed anymore. You know it's on the way. If we intend power, we can access it today. Thank you. So, I love food. And I love food from all over the world. And I love music from all over the world. And I love spirituality from all over the world. So I'm going to ask you to just take a moment and gaze around the circle, see people. Don't look, see them. Don't forget to breathe. And see people. Now I'm going to ask you now to close your eyes and just begin to breathe in that light of benevolence, and shine it out to the people around the circle, breathing nice and easily. Just breathing in love and shining it out. Breathing in forgiveness and shining out forbearance. Breathing in faith and exhaling out love. Now bring it out from beyond this circle, people that you love, the whole wide world. Take a nice breath in and sigh it out, one breath. And with an open heart, let's move into the day. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.